Hello, folks. We are pleased to join you from Olin to talk about engineering education in the public interest. I'm Allison. I am on our faculty, and we'll introduce ourselves as we go. Olin's mission has always included working for the good of the world. In recent years, we've been taking that further, and as we do with just about everything at Olin, we're partnering closely with students in this. We want to tell you today about a few ways we're doing this work. But first, a note on words. So many are relevant to this work, but diffuse language makes it harder to communicate and to collaborate. Today, we're primarily focusing on civic engagement, indicating individual responsibility as a professional to contribute to collective change aimed at a more sustainably just and equitable world. And we use some common approaches to achieve this. Rob will tell us more about how this comes from Olin's history and mission.
Thank you, Allison. So hi, everyone. I'm Rob Martello. I'm also a faculty member at Olin. I've been around Olin since the beginning, and on the screen, we're looking at Olin's mission statement, and we've bolded and put colors on three parts of the mission, three important goals that Olin has been trying to achieve since the very beginning. The goal of educating students to become, exceptional engineers, this idea of directing our efforts towards achieving good in the world, and the idea of being innovators, educational transformation, and running educational experiments. And in the beginning, Olin really saw these goals as competing with one another. We saw it as a zero-sum game. You could imagine a piece of pie where a pie where if one piece gets larger, the others have to get smaller to fit them all in. This was a very stressful kind of competitive model in the early days of Olin. And we shifted to a different model. We fortunately came to realize the three goals were mutually reinforcing. It was possible to achieve many goals by doing the same activities. In particular, Olin took on a certain definition of engineering education. We realized that the best way we could prepare our students for careers as successful engineers was to involve them in educational transformation, to involve students as partners in our educational innovation, and also to involve students in the act of doing good and practicing civic engagement from the very beginning throughout their curricular experiences. So there are so many examples of this. I'd love to go into more detail later, but just a few that are captured here include inviting 30 students to come to Olin for 1 year as partners while we were still building the campus and curriculum. We've continued the term partners to the present day in ways of explaining the way students help us do everything we're trying to do. We have design courses that teach students about the importance of different perspectives, of different stakeholders. And we have interdisciplinary integration at many points in our curriculum that have students blend together humanities, social sciences, arts, science, and engineering perspectives in activities that are directly practicing civic engagement and working towards the public good. And I'm going to turn it back to Allison in a moment, who's going to talk about Olin's Grand Challenges Scholars Program, one of the programs that achieves all of the goals I was just mentioning. Olin is following the National Academy of Engineering, which started a nationwide Grand Challenges program in 2008. Olin was one of the first 3 schools to do this, and it's a program attempting to educate students to become, to use their engineering towards worldwide causes. And back to Allison.
Thanks, Rob. So Olin's version of this program currently centers around a course that Rob and I created together. We use humanities-based approaches and critical reflection to help students develop their identities and set goals to build their sense of civic engagement. The culminating project asks them to respond to the questions, who am I and what is my place in the world? Putting all of this into a course helps us put resources toward it and get more students involved. The student steering committee that helps shape and run the program has also helped shape the development of the course, as have the students taking the course. This fall, I'm working with that student steering committee and with the student leadership of PINT, which Shreya is going to tell us about in a moment. We're collaborating to integrate civic engagement through more of Olin's curricular and co-curricular space and to get more people involved. So here are a few things that Rob and I would love to talk more with you about in the discussion portion, but for the moment, I'm going to hand it off to Shreya to tell us about PINT.
Sweet, thanks, Allison. Hi, I'm Shreya Chaudhary. I'm a junior at Olin College, and I'm one of the founding student organizers of PINT. which is a public interest tech project team at Olin. PINT aims to create experiences in and pathways to public interest tech, which we define as a movement of technologists defined broadly who are centering their work around social justice, the common good, and the public interest. I, with a few other students, created PINT because I wanted and needed practical experience in public interest tech, so I could really picture what a career using my expertise in technology to serve the public would actually look like. PINT central programs are experiential programs like a pro bono technical consulting clinic and a fully funded summer fellowship that provides opportunities for students to practice community-engaged technology work with real stakeholders and meaningful projects. These experiential programs are supported by skill shares and other activities that create a community of learners. Through this community, we as students are able to reflect on and critically examine our personal and professional identities in relation to our values, responsibilities, and hopes. Most importantly, all of these programs are conceptualized and are stewarded by students, with faculty as supporters and mentors, which truly makes us the creators of our own educational experiences and also helps us practice public interest tech in creating these experiences for ourselves and other students. In this way, PINT exemplifies an extracurricular approach that, through maximizing student agency, integrates civic engagement and engineering education. Next slide. So in the discussion portion, you can ask me about any more details about PINT, including some of these particularly interesting stories. And for the time being, I'll pass it on to Maggie.
Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm the Academic Engagement Librarian at Olin. So in the library, we employ the lessons learned and practiced in GCSP, in PINT, and in Olin's core curriculum. As in Olin's mission and in GCSP, students recognize a need and are invited to help us design solutions for both our physical space and in our policies. In the library, students immediately affect change on the physical side and can advocate for it on the policy side. Our job is to listen and engage with them. They are our partners. Students can literally rearrange the library to fit their needs. Much of our furniture is mobile, including bookshelves and couches on caster wheels. With prior permission, we host many events and student art projects, pictured on this slide. The library is open 24 hours, but it's only staffed from 9 to 5. We trust students, and we think because they know we trust them, they do a really wonderful job caring for the space. For policies and collections, we solicit feedback in formal ways like surveys and statistical analysis, and informal ways by talking casually with our students, participating in and hosting book groups, and doing our daily work in the common spaces instead of our offices. These invite natural interactions. Students feel comfortable voicing their opinions to us, and the respect and trust given them enables these easy conversations. As a department, we're guided by the core values of librarianship, which mirror the principles mentioned throughout this presentation. Free, confidential access to information, service to our community, and here I'm reading directly from our website, cultivating learning, literacy, and introspection with an emphasis on cultural preparation for democratic participation in society. We bring these core values to every interaction and discuss them openly. This ethical advocacy is also an effort at transparency. In the library, students are informed stakeholders, and this allows them to practice civic engagement on a small institutional scale and to see that they can create change when they take action. Next slide. So I'm happy to talk to you about cultivating and empowering student agency in a collegiate physical space and the benefits of student buy-in and all things library.
And hi, I'm Erhard. So I'm an assistant professor at Olin, as well as Olin's designee to the Public Interest Technology University Network. And I want to wrap up our presentation by recommending a framework based on the examples and stories that we've shared today. So undergraduates in engineering are looking to engage with current events, ethics, justice, equity, sustainability, and impact. This has long been present in Olin's curriculum, as Rob mentioned, and we are witnessing rising demand from students. We expect this is true elsewhere. Student interest can help drive these initiatives forward. Learn from your students and involve them early and directly in the educational design process. While technical skills will remain important, we believe our ability to solve the most complex challenges is dependent on our skills in collaboration and communication. The importance of these skills is not new. Employers have long requested them too. What is different now is our emerging appreciation of the civic role engineers play and the impending sense of urgency that should motivate us to consider how sustaining our society and our planet underlie our personal and professional responsibilities. The humanities enable us to understand this challenge and provide us tools for engaging with the complex context in which we work, particularly our ability to pursue equity and justice. They offer approaches for ethical thinking as both individuals as well as collectives. And Olin's GCSP class and library really exemplify this. Experiential learning enables us to engage authentically with complex challenges and to put our collaboration, communication, and technical skills to practice. The nuances of work with real stakeholders and partners demand that we stretch ourselves to learn more, and importantly, to ask for help from a wider range of experts. I think Pint really exemplifies this. Reflection then connects these pieces together, especially when we ask ourselves, what are the responsibilities of engineers and what are the responsibilities of citizens? Higher education is a project of personal and professional identity development. Undergraduate engineering must continue to seek the ideals of a liberal education, which empowers individuals with broad knowledge and transferable skills and a stronger sense of values like equity and justice and civic engagement. We are creating citizens with expertise in engineering who must share their knowledge and work closely with their fellow citizens to solve our world's most pressing challenges. And with that, we'll wrap up and look forward to engaging in some of the questions that we shared early in the presentation and the larger conversation in the breakouts. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any questions for the Olin team?
John, I've got one, but I'm busy typing, so I'll just say it, I think. Great talk. I really liked it. Particularly, you know, I've worked with Deb Chakra for quite a few years now, so and had an opportunity to come visit, and it's really interesting to see how you're developing year on year to reach these goals. One thing I talked to Deb quite a lot about is engineering leadership and students developing their own leadership style, and so we're in a small, I suppose, cohort or research group with others in universities in the US, where they explicitly teach engineering leadership, and they have engineering leadership courses and even programs and certificates. Now, much like UCL, Olin doesn't explicitly teach engineering leadership. That there is no course designated to it, but clearly, you know, your students are developing their leadership. And are, you know, proven to be leaders, you know, upon graduation and in what they do. So I wonder how that happens. I said implicitly it's happening. What do you think are the key elements of what you do that, and perhaps the key elements of engineering leadership that you find in students because of these initiatives?
I can take a crack at that question.
That'd be great.
Being a student that is going through the program and learning how to be a leader. And I can definitely testify to having grown as a leader a lot through my experiences at Olin. And I think a big component is being given the chance to try to be a leader and being given the chance to conceptualize an idea and try it out and see what happens, then reflect on the implications of the decisions that I made and what that meant for the people I was working with and working for. I think engineers are taught a lot about thinking about the decisions that they make in an engineering context and the implications for their design, but not necessarily taught to apply that same like consideration of the impacts of your work on the people that you're working for. So this orientation towards engineering the public interest and the opportunity to actually try that has really fostered a leadership mindset in me. And I think like, my experiences leading Pint are definitely major examples of this, because I didn't know what I was doing when I created Pint. It was just kind of trying things out, going based off of my values and the needs that I perceived in my community, which are also my own needs. I think that's a major component of leadership, like feeling as though you're reflecting the community that you're trying to serve. And that continuously guided me and the other student leaders. And I think the final thing I would say on this point is that I have definitely learned that leadership is still a group effort. Like I work with other student leaders and I work with our mentor Erhard, and it's always even as I'm leading, I'm working with others to lead. It's not really a solitary effort. And I think that Olin's emphasis on team-based, project-based learning has also really helped in fostering my ability to work with others and lead in teams.
Thank you. I think that's so important in many ways, because if you think about our thought leaders at the moment, you know, there are some very good leaders, but then there are others that influence in ways that perhaps don't have that well-rounded approach. Thank you so much for that. That was lovely.
I could add one quick point. It's risky to follow Shreya because that was so beautifully, perfectly said that I'm now going to ruin it, right? But there was just one, I thought that was a beautiful emphasis upon context, Shreya. I thought that I couldn't say it that well myself. As educators, when we're forming teams and trying to create these leadership experiences, something we're trying very hard to do is really identify the goals, the learning objectives of each of these experiences. If we say that there is a project team working together and we want to develop leadership and communication, and then at the end of the project, all we're looking at is the effectiveness of the robot that you've designed, that's sending a mixed message. It's not effectively closing the loop. So very often, if we have a team-based activity, we acknowledge that one of the things that's taking place is developing leadership and practice. I threw communication in there. That's another possible goal that you might argue is correlated with leadership. But this means you need to build metrics into the activity. You need to explain what you're looking for, find a way to include it in the assessment or reflection in some ways. So this kind of goal alignment is something that we work at as best we can. It's something that's tricky. It's always a challenge at Olin because at the end of the day, sometimes you default to what you're used to doing. I'm used to assessing this project team based on the effectiveness of the robot that you built. But if we're saying it really is a team building experience and leadership is a part of it, we need to make time for that, to have reflections built in, to have some kind of assessment that's doing that. In that case, we really feel that we've done justice to that goal. And we're trying to make sure that we do that at different points in the curriculum. So students are actually getting feedback on what we want them to be learning in each experience. I just wanted to add that to all the excellent stuff.
Absolutely. I think that's a valid point indeed. I think the other thing that I would add too, in terms of leadership, there's context that needs to come into play when it comes to leadership. And, you know, I think engineering leaders are a little bit different than perhaps, you know, leaders in other disciplines. And I think that technical sensitivity to how we apply technology and where we go with that, as well as, you know, leading the team, right? So there's more than just, you know, motivating the team and doing that. But I think with regards to engineering leaders, many people look to those leaders because they have that sensitivity to understand when technology is being used, how to move into a direction that's perhaps, you know, not as straightforward, all of that sort of, you know, sense of confidence, and maybe even, as Shreya had said, bring people together to make those decisions together. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. There's a question from Christine here. Love the idea of including students in the design. But could you say a little bit more about the sort of decisions you include them in? Curriculum changes? What are the sort of key areas that they're involved in?
I can say a little bit about how Rob and I involved them in the development of this course that we've been teaching. It began actually 2 years ago when we were first designing the course. As the director of GCSP of our Grand Challenge Scholars Program, I meet with our student steering committee every week. And so in many of those meetings, I would discuss with the team what Rob and I were thinking about for the class, get feedback from them and ideas and suggestions, and have a lot of back and forth directly with these students as we were doing initial planning of the class. Then in the class itself, we had a mix of direct feedback from students that we would collect periodically throughout the semester, as well as things like we had a small project late in the semester where the students had an opportunity to design a new learning experience that would happen in the course in the future. And so they took about a week and a half and got in teams, and they had to establish learning objectives and tell us how they would design and run this activity. And we actually took some of those, and we didn't use them quite exactly as the students wrote them, but actually some of them in pretty close form to what the students gave us, we integrated into the class the following year. And then we've continued that cycle of working with the students as we continue to develop the class, getting more feedback, going back to the students. And that's one way that I would say from the Olin perspective is actually fairly faculty heavy. It's fairly faculty led, that we're getting having a lot of discussion with students and a lot of input with students. But at the end of the day, Rob and I have been the ones generally making final decisions about what's going to happen in the classroom. And in a lot of other spaces in Olin, students are actually much more driving things forward and making the decisions themselves.
Excellent, thank you. There's a question here saying something, could you say something a little more about the reflection component that is emphasized, and maybe some examples? Rob, you were the first to unmute. It's like a gunfight.
Allison and I were playing a little game of staring each other down there, right? So I guess, so Allison, should I start? Maybe I'll say a few things and you can take it home. How about that? About that plan? We'll model a little teamwork here, maybe, right? Yes. So we could do that. But reflection is something that's present in many different places in Olin. I'm thinking of it again as a course at the course level, although that is not the only level where we have it. We can actually talk about reflective components in programs like the GCSP program writ large, or PINT, or other aspects like that. But within a course, we're trying very hard. Allison, you mentioned actually in your part of the presentation that one of the goals of our course is who am I, right? So we're building that front and center into a course about how do I change the world? What's the direction of my career supposed to be? And we kind of start with a very basic who am I? So the reflection, so that's very nice, but it's abstract sounding. We have assignments built into the course, reflective assignments that often they could take different forms. It could be the form of individual goal setting, where we might have a student at the beginning of the semester set learning goals for themselves. And part of that activity is usually explaining why. So you don't just say, I want to learn A, B, and C, but you say, here's why this matters to me. And then at the end of the semester, you close that loop by returning to those goals and assessing your performance. And again, you might say, were those the right goals? How did I think my performance rated? What are my next steps? So by building this kind of activity into different experiences, we're trying to make it part of the practice, where there is a constant stepping back from the activity, where you're saying, okay, what am I doing right now? Why am I doing it? What are the goals of the activity I'm participating in? Are those the right goals? Am I achieving those goals, right? Is there a different way that I could work on these? And the last thing I'll say, this even ties in a little bit to the prior question too, is that in some cases, this requires a little bit of humility on the parts of the professors, who might just say, I believe this next activity will achieve the following learning goals. Let's give it a try. And at the end, we're going to talk about what it did or did not achieve as a group. And this way, like we sometimes describe it as like in the Wizard of Oz, let's peek behind the curtain. So instead of just presenting you with this finished, product and assuming it's all working well, I'm going to explain what I think we're doing and why I think these are the right steps to take. And you're going to help me figure out if this worked or not. As a partner in this learning experience, you're qualified to reflect on the journey you just took and the destination you reached. And we can all talk about it. And then even if we decide it wasn't the optimal activity, you derive something even more valuable out of it by having this conversation and becoming, metacognitively aware, right, so to speak. Allison, I'm sure I left some things out about reflection in our course.
Well, what I would love to add is that the kind of reflection Rob's talking about, we strive to do throughout the Olin curriculum on individual learning and project work. In our class, we've also been trying to get students to reflect more personally and particularly reflect on themselves situated within larger systems and situated within their own communities. So a number of the reflective activities we have ask them to think not just about what am I learning from this learning experience, but what have I learned over the accumulated set of learning experiences I've had to date, and how do those make me? What is it that I actually care about because of those things? And how might I go forward and act on these things that I care about? Particularly with an eye to situating oneself within a community, and we ask them to define their own communities, whether that's the Olin community or a faith community or a family or geographic community, whatever that means to them. And then get very specific about how they're going to translate their own values and their own discoveries about themselves and their priorities into actions moving forward to contribute to those communities.
Excellent. Thank you very much. we'll call you back in a little bit. Thank you.